I wanted to try and show you with a simple drawing the process that I'm following. You can see that the first thing that I did was to create the depth hole with the drill bit. The first hollowing stage is widening out around that hole down to a predefined depth, and roughly 2 inches in this case. Then I'm starting to widen that hole even further, then proceeding next to widen it out a little bit more, and then finally I'm going to proceed to the final wall thickness down to that depth. Then what I'll do is I'll repeat the process going down the form as many times as necessary till I get to the bottom, using the depth hole as a guide. Okay, I'm continuing the hollowing process, and I need to actually start to widen out this hole a little further beyond where the straight bit will go, and you can see I've put an angled cutter into the straight bar, and so now I should be able to start to widen that hole out. This cutter, given that it's off axis, is going to generate quite a bit more torque as I turn, so I need to be less aggressive with this tool as I go, and as long as I'm reasonable about the amount of material that I'm trying to take away and I clear the shavings repeatedly, I'll be just fine with this tool, so I can start to widen this out. See, the shavings are starting to pile up into the form now, and I really need to be diligent about getting them out so that I can continue the process of hollowing without being in danger of the shavings grabbing the tip of the tool and torquing it around on me. Just a point to note that I don't think I mentioned earlier, with all these scraping tools I'm cutting right at center. With this tool I may tip it down, angle it downward toward the direction of cut, and then slowly rotate it up into the cut just so that it's not jamming straight into the side of the piece, and that just gives me a little bit more of fine control as I go in there. You also have to be obviously very careful as you remove, especially this tool or the curved bar, because of the fact that you can easily grab the opening on the way out and damage or ruin the piece. Okay, I'm basically through step 3 on this little picture here. You can see I started to use compressed air to blow the shavings out because at this point they're getting packed in there, and so there's quite a few of them, and it's a lot easier than trying to reach your finger in or some other implement in to get them out. Obviously keep your hand over it. If you angle the nozzle in one direction, the shavings will circulate around and come out the other direction and hopefully not get you in the face, but it's good to keep your hand over it just in case. At this point, given that we're at step 3 there of the hollowing process, we need to start to hollow down to the finished thickness in the first section, and so I'm going to switch over to a bent tool to do that. Okay, at this stage you can see I've got the bent tool in the hollowing arm brace, and it's bent at an angle so I can reach around to the inside shoulder of the form. The cutter, more or less, is in line with the shaft, so the torque isn't too bad. However, you have to be careful because of the fact that this bent area always needs to be beyond the edge of the tool rest. If I'm here operating on the straight part of the bar, it's not too bad in terms of torque. However, if I get here, you can see what's going to happen. There's torque at this point from the cutting action, and it's going to immediately send the tool downward and cause a catastrophic problem. So you have to be very careful getting this tool in and out of the form, and always make sure that you're cutting with the tool beyond with the tool such that the straight portion of the tool is over the tool rest, and you never go beyond that point where the curved part is on the tool rest. Wanted to just show you how I start to measure for thickness on these hollow forms. You can see I've got a bent piece of steel here with the edges rounded over so that they don't scratch the form, and I use this with a fixed opening with one end pointing directly at the other to actually gauge the thickness of the work. So I can see that this is roughly ½ an inch here, depending on what thickness I'm shooting for. Probably for this piece between 1/4 inch and 3/16 of an inch I'll go for as finished thickness, and I can ride this end along the inside, always sighting perpendicular to the walls, and I can gauge the gap that's left. So I have probably a wall thickness of maybe a little bit more than 1/4 inch up here, and it starts to get just a hair thinner here. Then I start to get toward the corner, so what I can do is I can turn the measuring device around, the caliper around, and I can get into the corner here, and I can continue down the form and see what sort of gap I have on the outside. As I get deeper into the form, I just have a couple of different sizes of these, and I can bend them accordingly to actually continue the measurement. So at this stage, I've continued to hollow, and I'm basically at my final wall thickness of about 3/16 of an inch or so in the top half of the form. I can measure it down to the depth. Starts to get just a little bit thicker right in this area here, which is where I'm transitioning to the next stage. So at this point, all that's left to be done is to continue that process down the form. It may take me two more iterations of that process to get through, and from there we'll be able to complete the actual hollowing of the form. Not sure if you were able to see that on that view, but we'll be able to complete the hollowing of the form. Then we'll turn it around into a jam chuck and complete the bottom. I'm continuing with the hollowing process, and I've widened out the center hole to a new depth, and now I'm continuing to approach the final wall thickness. I can probably do most all of this with the straight tool and the angled tool here, as opposed to going to the bent arm tool, the curved arm tool. I may have to go to that just to get right into this area, but we'll see. But at this point, you'll see when I start to hollow here that there's an actual ridge from the center hole that I've widened out, and then it steps off into the completely hollowed area in the upper half, and I'll find that ridge and then start to refine that and move it over slowly. So there's the ridge. Well, there's still a substantial ridge there that I need to continue to work over toward the actual final wall thickness. So I'll continue to do that, and I'll measure as I go along. I can feel right now with my fingers still that there's quite a bit of room. Once I start to approach the wall thickness, I'll start to measure, most likely with this larger caliper that time. Okay, I'm starting to approach the final wall thickness in the second stage, and what you'll see here when I start to hollow again is I'm going to be essentially flexing my fingers as I find that ridge and want to approach the actual final wall thickness. I'll flex my fingers to just bring the tool in small steps as I work down the form.